Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around, it is the 300th video I'm casting and or releasing of Quick Match for Warhammer 2, and what I really wanted to do here was do a little bit of craziness, do some cheesing, do some ridiculousness, and so that's really what we're going to be casting here. So for this first match, it's just a very short one. It's going to be three. We've got 3 games I want to show you. 2 of them involving this lovely tool here called the Temple of Luminark. So just going for a little bit of cheesing, a little bit of ridiculousness, and yeah, so without further ado, let's hop right in. This game against the Tomb Kings on the Plane of Spiders, playing as the Empire. Nothing too fancy to say here, really. We did bring Boris for our Lord. I think Boris is, of course, very solid. He's dirt cheap, and for all he brings to the table, gives you some AP, he gives you some White Cloak of Roller, Crush the Weak, all that sort of stuff. One of the important things to keep in mind when you are dealing with the Tomb Kings is that even if you go a little bit cheesy with the Temple of Luminark, you still have to be wary of monsters like the Chosen of the Gods, like the Ushapti Great Bows, those sorts of multi-model units, because the Luminark is actually not very good against them. Luminark's solid against cavalry. It's decent against very, very clumped up infantry. You can get a very dense clump, it'll do okay, and then it's extremely good against single models. These sorts of spaced out monsters, spread out infantry, it's pretty atrocious against. So we did bring 2 great cannons, including the Hammer of Witches, so a very expensive artillery battery here. This is roughly 3,800 worth, so about a quarter of my army here is expended on artillery. For the front line, going a little cheap, of course, because we don't have the money, so 2 great swords, a few spearmen, 1 unit of spears in the back, and then to hopefully harass my opponent's backline, if you went heavy on, say, as archers, we do have 2 units of Empire Knights. Finally, we do have a single unit of Outriders with grenade launchers to provide some explosive support in close quarters. Over here we do have a Light Wizard who does the net, the Phos Protection, Exorcism of course, as well as Banishment. And once again, trying to deal with mobs with any tools that do not involve artillery, because artillery is just too expensive. So kicking things off, my opponent's build, pretty conventional. This is definitely the sort of build I would actually recommend. Not necessarily the sort of literally tit for tat, maybe I do something a little different, but honestly, this is a pretty solid composition. So looking right at it, we've got Arkan on foot, which I think is one of the only major mistakes here. Arkan's very competitive. He does have Fate of Buna. He's got Spear Leech. He's got his Tomb Blade. He's got his Staff of Nagash and all that sort of stuff. So he's very solid. He does even have, I'm pretty sure that's the Libra Mortis. So he's got some solid abilities, which is great. But lacking amount is definitely going to make him a very vulnerable target. The front line here composed of Tomb Guard, no Kepler Guard, which I do think is a very good choice in this matchup, but nonetheless Tomb Guard is definitely very solid against most Empire troops. Ushapti Great Bows as well as the Chosen of the Gods here to provide some counter battery fire, as well as to hopefully shut down my infantry mob and whittle down the Great Swords. A whole bunch of Skeleton Archers, no Legion of Demonetization. Once again, what I think is a little bit of a mistake. I think you want to get Legion of Demonetization, you want to get Kepler Guard in these sorts of builds. But Infantry Heavy is definitely a great way to go against Empire, because it means my Luminark doesn't have much to shoot at, and even the cannons are kind of lacking in targets. Finally, we do have these 2 Skeleton Spears veteran up, as well as 2 Tomb Guard in the back with Halberd. So a very solid infantry corps, definitely very solid composition here, and immediately we are pushing to meet. You can see the poor Ushapti Great Bows. You're getting pounded by the Hammer of the Witches as well as the normal cannon. So an absolute crossfire just tearing into them and leaving them just staggered and falling apart. Anytime the Luminark is going to be firing off, over here just passing through, hitting Ark in the black and knocking off a whole bunch of his HP. So especially now that Ark no longer has healing, this is incredibly brutal. Anytime before my opponent can get his Ushapti set up, we are going to dive in with Boris, because they did overextend. They were in such a rush to get shots off, and now they're going to get shut down. In the meantime, this unit over here of Ushapti getting torn apart by cannon fire and really not having a good time. Well, the Luminark does charge up another shot and is going to be going for the jugular here, going after poor Arkan, who is not able to dodge because he is on foot. This is why you should bring him mounted. Regardless, you can see the Skeleton Warriors here being summoned to hopefully interdict. You can see my opponent trying to shut down Boris, but this little foray here with Boris, of course we can heal everything back up, and it does mean that not only did my opponent lose one of his Chosen of the Gods, it means they haven't been firing. And in the meantime, he's lost his other unit of Great Bows, and now my cannons will be able to start firing away at these Chosen of the Gods and really put them in the gutter. In the meantime, poor Arkan popping the Staff and Gash, trying to get a little bit of value here, trying to get any spells off, but he actually crumbles and dies in seconds. Anytime you can see that crossfire still raining in from the cannons. Boris over here soaking up shot after shot, doing his very best, and now having shut down my opponent's missile pressure, or most of it, we are going to start pushing forward with the Great Swords, with the Spearmen, and start applying some real pressure there. So you can see the Skeleton Archers, they're taking immediate hit, losing about 30 models to the single shot from the Temple of Luminark, and now in the front line, Spearmen can hold the Tomb Guard for a good amount of time, but the Empire Knights will do really well. The Great Swords are going to dumpster the Tomb Guard in close quarters. And over here, good old Boris Todbringer is just cycling around, being a nuisance, and not being shut down. In the meantime, the cannonballs shutting down these Ushapti great bows. You can see the luminark there just blowing one of them to smithereens, and really these guys are having a terrible time. So Empire pressure, just really doing some work. You can see these Empire Knights are being able to sort of skirt around. Empire Knights, not the most amazing cavalry in the game, definitely on the lower end of things, but if they can get into the backline against units like the Skeleton Archers, they will do pretty well. And you can see the grenade launchers here destroying the Tomb Guard. One of the really powerful sort of niches, just destroying infantry. These guys are so good in that sort of function. Anytime the crossfire continues pounding on, the Ushapti, or the Chosen of Gods, reduces 2 models. Here in the lines, you can see the Spearmen holding out the greatswords, trashing these Tomb Guard. Yeah, they're taking some casualties. They're not a perfect unit. But they're not that much more expensive than Tomb Guard, and they're winning this pretty decisively. They could probably take 2 on 2 units in consecutive fashion. And you can see as my opponent at this point simply decides to GG out, as he has been unable to really lock us out. So the first of 3 games I'm going to be demonstrating just to show a little bit of Templar of Luminark silliness. Also, don't push. If your Lord brings a Templar of Luminark, push forward with everything else, and don't let the Templar of Luminark snipe out your Lord, especially if you're a faction susceptible to that sort of stuff, like the Tomb Kings here. The way my opponent ended up in that game, I would have then been able to sort of pick apart his backline with the Empire Knights. The cannons could have kept pounding away at the front line, and the greatswords, you know, they were holding up. They were really doing a great job in the front, dealing with the Tomb Guard. So my opponent would have found himself in a very bad situation there. Regardless, good game here. I do hope you guys enjoyed, and we're going to be hopping on over to some of the other matchups that I've got to demonstrate. So this time around, in match number 2 here, the tale of the tape is a little different. We are on a Stallion Tomb, and this time around we are playing as the forces of the undead. So Vampire counts against good old Empire. The old classic matchup. Kind of difficult to get much else as Vampire counts. Seems like every match I play as these guys, I end up against Empire. But rather than doing what I normally do, which is sort of bring Blood Knights and Vargulfs, you guys certainly probably seen it on the channel at this point, I decided to do something a little wonky, a little silly, and go for a bit of a more monster-heavy build. Going for the composition real quick, for my Lord here, I did decide to bring the Strigar Ghoul King. So this guy, not amazing. But he does bring poison today, and he does bring AP. Plus he's got a cool little summon here. He's got a mixed lore of death and lore of vampires, but he's got a cool little ability here. He can summon Crypt Ghouls, or when overcast, he can summon Crypt Horrors in the enemy backline, which is pretty crazy. So we're bringing him here just to dish out some hurt. He's got Soul Blight for debuffs, Invocation of Neck for the heals, Bloodlust, Opal Amulet, all that good stuff. So very solid Lord. Fairly cheap. He is a little susceptible to shooting because of his low armor, but no shields. But nonetheless, he's got a lot of HP. He's decent. Front line of Graveguard, nothing fancy, just 3 units there, as well as some zombies to soak up missile fire. Basically just to tie my opponent's troops down, buy me time for all the rest of the army to really do the work. And the rest of the army, as you can see, is very, very disparate. We do have a unit of Devils of Schwarzhofen, who I really wanted to try out here, up in the sky. These guys, as you may know, the Vargeist, not a very popular pick in quick match. The main reason being that they're incredibly squishy. They've got atrocious HP at 4740, and no armor basically, and kind of pitiful melee defense, especially normal Vargeist. And for all that, they're pretty expensive. Even the Vargeist normal ones are 1,000, but nonetheless, I figured, you know, give these guys a shot. I didn't use their Vanguard deployment, but these guys do cause fear, terror. They've got Frenzy, so really pretty solid, and they're actually pretty mobile with 92 speed. And if you get them on a squishy infantry unit, they are going to do some work. In this last batch, Vargeist did get a bonus to their AP, so now they are a little more competitive, hopefully, even against units like Greatswords. Now for the rest of the build here, we do have some Fellbats on the periphery to shut down enemy shooting, just to be a harass tool. Here in the woods, we do have a Necromancer. I do think you need to bring normal zombie or skeleton summons to shut down backlines, even if you do bring the Strigar Ghoul King, especially if you do, because Crypt Ghouls are just too expensive and you don't have enough charges to use them like that. But he does bring extra Invocation of Nag, extra Raise Dead, and he is alongside a unit of Blood Knights, who are an amazing cavalry unit. I absolutely love them. I think they're arguably the best cavalry in the game. Even if they're not the best in, say, a 1v1 with Demigryphs, I think they are one of the best, if not the best cavalry in the game, just for their raw flexibility and pretty awesome stats. Terrorgeist up in the sky, providing some breath attacks and fear, terror, poison, and of course, a monstrous AP anti-large. Off to the flank, we do have the Dire Pack, who can shut down and zone off enemy Outriders, Pistoliers, that sort of stuff. And finally, in the woods, the Feasters in the Dusk. So nothing too fancy. These guys are, in my opinion, one of those hidden gems in the Vampire roster, and they can definitely, if they get a jump on somebody, especially like Halberdiers, they can tear them to shreds with their decent melee stats, high weapon strength, poison, and all that sort of stuff. Plus, they do have stalk, so they can sneak up and catch your opponent unawares. Now, my opponent here, going with a bit of a interesting build. Definitely not necessarily uncompetitive. Definitely taking a bit of a risk, though, with Karl Franz here on Deathclaw with no Lore of Life. but he does have Reichland Runefang, he does have Golem Raz, Foe Seeker, Stand Your Ground, Hold the Line, so everything I do believe. Frontline with Greatswords and Swordsmen, decent enough. Usually I think Greatswords are the way to go against Vampire counts. I think just mass Greatswords is the way to go. But you know, this gonna hold okay. The halberds on the flanks, providing some additional anti-large AP against flanking units. If I decide to flank with Cryptars, with Blood Knights, with the Black Knights, with anything like that, the halberdiers are ready to go. And these guys with their new buff to charge defense, they're even better against infantry now than they used to be. Here in the pits, the main firing squad, 2 units of crossbowmen, as well as the silver bullets ready to get at the jump on my troops, as well as a bright wizard with burning head, fireball, and burning bolts. So basically a spell for every occasion, lord sniping, single model shooting, heavy armor with the piercing bolts, and then of course burning head to melt infantry. Finally, here in the very back we do have Demigryph Knights with halberds, providing some AP anti-large, and Knights of the Blazing Sun on the flank, providing simply some anti-infantry monstrosity. These guys are really solid with their high weapon strength, fire damage, high charge bonus. They can really destroy the vast majority of Vampire count infantry and monsters. They're really the only thing they're not great against is like Graveguard, kind of, and Blood Knights. Blood Knights are really these guys' main counter. Nonetheless, you can see over here, my opponent zones off my Fellbats with some fire, and now you can see the handguns and the silver bullets and the crossbowmen pounding away at my Strigoi Ghoul King, trying to teach him a lesson and tell him to stay on his own side of things. Not wishing to risk my Terrorgeist, we are going to pull back. And over here, I actually did manage to spot my opponent's Knights of the Blazing Sun. They spotted my Crypt Ghouls, I spotted them, and I pulled back before my opponent noticed and took advantage of that because I didn't feel like losing these guys prematurely. In the meantime, on the periphery, we are pushing around with the bats, trying to get into my opponent's backline. You can see we're at this point collapsing from all sides. We've got the Vargheists diving in. One of the important things to keep in mind is that bats have a monstrous melee defense. So against units like spears and halberds, which are usually the most common backline defense, these guys hold up really, really well. Despite their lack of armor, despite their low HP, they're just very, very hard to kill for units with low melee attack like halberdiers. So we're going to be diving in, trying to shut down these crossbows. And yeah, things are going okay. Over here in the front line, the Strigoi Ghoul King does dive into these swordsmen, helping the Graveguard chop through them more efficiently. While elsewhere, you can see the Greatswords, of course, will be doing very well. And a piercing bolts of burning is coming down to make the situation worse. Unfortunately for my opponent, though, the silver bullets having a terrible time with these Fellbats diving in, tying down all these troops. And Fellbats over here tying down these crossbows. That means the Devils of Schwarzhofen have free reign to dive in and slaughter the poor silver bullets. Meantime, Crypt Ghouls are going to get summoned and push forward, diving straight into these crossbows and providing even more damage. Unfortunately for my opponent here, he is trying to pull away with the Knights of the Blazing Sun, trying to escape, but we are cycling around behind them with the Blood Knights, with the Necromancer. And as my opponent tries to shut down the Devils of Schwarzhofen, who have been buffed with Bloodlust, we are simply going to pull away. Unfortunately for me, though, my opponent here very wisely sniping out my Strigoi Ghoul King with Karl, and you can see just laying the royal smackdown on this guy, who's really just doesn't have the stats to stand up to the Emperor, and having a bad day. Unfortunately, a bit of a misplay on my part here, but my Dire Pack and Terrorgeist are camping out over here on the flank, doing absolutely nothing while my front line gets destroyed. I do cast a Soul Blight and then pull the Devils of Schwarzhofen back, diving into the back line here, trying to disrupt, apply terror, and hopefully break this area. Unfortunately, though, Strigoi Ghoul King does go down, so a bad day over there, but, you know, the Graveguard will keep holding and will keep fighting, because that's what they do. In the meantime, the Silver Bullets being run down by the Knights of Blazing Sun, the Blood Knights. Even as the Necromancer here does help apply some pressure, we do get the zombie summon, disrupting the backline, keeping things tied down. And now this is the big problem with shooting against Vampire counts. As you're shooting routes, it then becomes an absolutely prime target for units like these Blood Knights to farm and slaughter. The poor Knights of the Blazing Sun here, kind of mauled. They're pushing into this infantry. Well, they'll definitely do okay, but they're probably going to take a nasty chunk of damage there from the bombardment. While here in the pits, things are going down between the angry Demigryph Knights as well as the Blood Knights. So a bit of a duel of the beastliest cavalry here. Both of these guys very, very solid, but Demigryph Knights do have the edge, especially given that they got the charge here and I did not. But of course, we're not going to let things be a fair fight because that's not how vampires play. And we're going to get a nice little zombie summon to help our Blood Knights win the day. In the meantime, over here, the Crypt Ghouls destroying the Halberdiers as expected. While over here in the pits, you can see the Vargheists chasing off these swordsmen, while my Graveguards sort of die here in the pits to the Knights of the Blazing Sun and the Greatswords. Finally, though, I do notice my anti-large goon squad, and we're going to pull them in to shut these guys down. In the meantime, the Graveguard finally buckled the swordsmen despite Karl Friend's best efforts. Burning Head here, destroying the poor Feasters in Dusk. Definitely not what I wanted, but it is what it is. In the meantime, though, the Blood Knights, with a little help from Invocation of the Heck, are going to be able to take on these Demigryph Knights. Of course, those zombies oversaturating them, also helping them a lot. Means the Demigryph Knights are being distracted, are being blocked off, and means the Blood Knights are getting a lot of free damage in there, uncontested. Those demigriffs are going down. In the meantime, necromancers summoning some skeleton warriors on top of these crossbows to shut them down and push them off the field. For my opponent, he did manage to basically destroy these feasters in the dusk. You can see they're getting destroyed there, unfortunately for me. The demigriff knights here trying to pull away, but being pursued very angrily by the Blood Knights. And here in the pits, we are going to get a nice little invocation of the heck on the feasters, which will help stabilize them and crush these halberds. Anytime I read the Terrorgeist and the Diropack diving in on Karl Franz, who has popped Golem Raz, who is trying to do his best to sort of get out of here and fight his way through, but no escape for him. We are coming for revenge from the Strigoi Ghoul King. His pet Terrorgeist here diving in and absolutely tearing through Karl, who does not have the best melee defense, especially once Stand Your Ground does wear off, which of course it inadvertently will. So you can see the poor Karl here just getting torn apart. So Diropack is actually really solid against large targets, and of course Karl here just getting torn to shreds. Greatswords here having a pretty good time. They're up to 100 kills. They've been destroying the graveyard, so definitely some good play there. But in the meantime, in the back line, the pits here, the things are definitely not looking as hot for Empire. Diropack and Terrorgeist shutting down Karl. He's not able to take back off into the air, getting poisoned, getting beaten down. One of the good things about Diropack or direwolves in general is they don't rout because they're undead. So oftentimes what you'll have, if you have, say, poison warhounds chasing a dragon, your opponent will get like one attack in and the hounds will rout. But a Diropack will just stay on him and they're never going to give up. So poor Karl there having a terrible time of it. My opponent trying to get a bombardment in there, but too little too late. The Demigriff Knights here are going to shatter, and with that, the game is going to end in favor of the Empire account. So you can see the Terrorgeist here flying in to get a few last sort of bites on the poor Bright Wizard, but really at this point it just doesn't matter. It's definitely a game for the Vampire accounts. So Vampire accounts, of course, very fun little faction. I don't recommend bringing much if any shooting against Vampire accounts. You can take them on in a melee and win. As most factions, you just got to focus on winning in the attrition fight. Maybe bring a unit of shooting like one, or bring something that can move, like Outriders or Outriders with grenade launchers. That can work. I think the only factions though that should really bring shooting against Vampire accounts are Dwarves and maybe Wood Elves that really need to. Otherwise, Cavalry can usually do the trick for you, or big single monsters can usually do the trick. But nonetheless, good game to my opponent here. You can see this Greatswords doing monstrous work. This is why I recommend bringing a frontline entirely composed of Greatswords against Vampire accounts, or majority with Greatswords. Just because they can trade very well with everything, including Graveguard with ray weapons. And of course, against they'll do great against Graveguard itself and everything lower tier. Demigriff Knights here had a little bit of an unfortunate run-in with the Blood Knights, so not what you want happening. And I was actually pretty pleased with the Devils. The Devils shutting down the Silver Bullets, disrupting the front line, sending swordsmen reeling and fleeing with their fear and terror. So these guys definitely a pretty cool unit. Not sure they're worth it still for the money, but they're pretty cool. And yeah, the main letdown here was the Strigoi Ghoul King, but he was just an experiment. Normally I'd probably bring like Vlad, who would be much harder to kill, but you know, it was fun doing a monster-themed build for the Vampire accounts. So we do have one more match that I do want to show you guys, and this one once again is going to be with the Luminark, but hopefully it will be worth the while. So this time we are on the River Mason, playing as the Empire once more against the forces of the Lizardmen, and for this little bit of ludicrousness, I did decide to once again bring the Luminark because, you know, it's a pretty good unit in this matchup, and it's a lot of fun. I've honestly been having a lot of fun with the Luminark. Sue me. I know it's horrible. It's a gimmicky unit. It's a bit of a scummy unit, but you know you can't deny it's fun. So for my front line, quickly going over the build, I knew that I needed to be able to shut down Lizardmen infantry, which is a much bigger threat than the monsters. If you got a Luminark and some shooting, I also wanted something to zone out, say, Pterodons, which my opponent did bring. I don't think Pterodons are particularly good, but I wanted to make sure to have something to shut them down, so I did bring some Silver Bullets. Quickly going over the rest of the list, though. Front line of Greatswords. As I've mentioned in several of my videos, including both Lizardmen and Empire videos, Greatswords are really good against Lizards. They'll outtrade Sarce Warriors. They'll even trade about 50-50 with Temple Guard, who are a much more expensive unit. For those of you guys who saw the tourney today, I do believe it was the matchup between Romulan Dog and Lore Master, I think it was. He used some Greatswords, and the Greatswords had an absolutely great effect on the front line fight. They definitely sort of helped clinch the fight there against the Lizardmen. So definitely, the Greatswords are a very, very good unit in this matchup. And definitely they can outperform Lizardmen pretty solidly. Now for the rest of the build, we do have the Luminark, we've got some Silver Bullets, we've got the Hammer of the Witches, a single unit of Spears because I had some points left over and wanted some extra backline protection. For my lord, going with Barfazar Gelt. So he's here on a horse because I didn't have the money for a better mount. He does have Transmutation of Lead, Glittering Robe, and Searing Doom. I figured Glittering Robe, if my opponent decided to go with a pretty heavy duty, say Stars front line, Glittering Robe would actually help a lot for the Greatswords, just help them hold the line a little bit longer, especially once they're a little tired out and they're losing their armor bit. Finally, we do have 2 units of Reiksguard who are applying giving me some additional mass, as well as sort of, some damage output, especially against lower end infantry, something to chase off skink skirmishers and that sort of stuff. For my opponent's build, the 2 Pterodon Riders, I can't even speak, but 2 Pterodon Riders, as well as Pterodons with Fire Leech Bolas, are over here on the flank. In my opinion, these guys are a pretty terrible unit. I do see people use them sometimes. I do know they can do some damage. They do have some AP on the Javelins. They do have some splash with the Fire Leech Bolas, but honestly, I think they're such a terrible unit. 0 out of 10 would not recommend, basically. I don't think they're worth it, but they can definitely be a powerful nuisance, and definitely you don't want to ignore them entirely, which is why you can see I do have these lovely silver bullets lined up and ready to go. In the meantime, looking at the rest of the build, my opponent did bring a whole bunch of skink cohorts who are here in the front line, as well as a skink priest of beasts mounted on a Ancient Stegodon. So an incredibly expensive investment. He does have Curse of Honorair, Flock of Doom, and Wiston's Wild Form, as well as the Cube of Darkness, which is definitely pretty potent, as well as a single unit of Temple Guard here. So this guy, of course, here, he's getting cold-blooded as he walls his way up, but the Hammer of Witches and the Luminark are not going to be merciful. And you can see they're just pounding away, taking off thousands of damage between those shots. And they're just going to keep focusing on him. You can see he does have 15% missile resistance, some armor, but it's just not going to be enough. But here in the woods, really, this is where my opponent's main strike force was hidden. 2 Horned Ones, as well as Krokgar, mounted on a, I do believe, is it a Horned one? It's a Horned one based on the speed. But you can see Krokgar, they're looking pretty awesome. I absolutely love the look of the Horned Ones. They're such an amazing unit, look-wise. I just wish they were a little better stat-wise. But regardless, as the fight, as we're sort of pushing on, you can see these King Priests here running out of cold-blooded, getting destroyed by cannon fire. My opponent finally a little desperate, committing his Pterodons here into the fray. But that is just going to open them up to more crossfire from these angry silver bullets. Oh, I did buff with the Glittering Robe to make them a little tankier against enemy shooting. You can see the volley fire coming in on the poor Pterodon Riders. Balthazar diving in. Really, I should have pulled the Reiksguard in here as well. So big misplay on my part, but it is what it is. So you can see my opponent here does try to pull off, but there's so much fire coming in from these angry silver bullets. Perhaps the second unit of handguns would have been good, or Free Company or something. Regardless, my opponent here commits very heavily onto this flank with his skinks. Not entirely sure what he was thinking, but they're bogged down, I guess. So we're going to be doing a bit of a counter charge here, trying to get our greatswords around, but it's definitely a little clunky. I do spot these Horned Ones last second and try to pull my Reiksguard away. The big problem is that Horned Ones are very, very quick. At 78 speed, they're one of the faster heavy cavs in the game, so they're definitely going to give me a bit of trouble. My opponent here does use Curse of Honorair to debuff my greatswords, and this is actually a very cost-effective trade for him. He's not going to win. He's not even going to do a lot of damage to the greatswords. That's not really a risk here. Losing is not going to happen. But 1,500 points worth of skinks is tying down 2,700 points worth of greatswords. So almost tying up double the resources they're worth. That is a big problem. Here in the pits, in the meantime, the Horned Ones are tearing my poor Reiksguard to shreds. You can see they're going to be able to push through to the Hammer of Witches. Luminark is doing a pretty good job here, trying to snipe away at the Skink Priest, trying to pressure him off the field. But in Krokgar, he does push around to try to get into the greatsword. So now things are kind of a little more even here, but unfortunately, not over here, they're not going ideal. The Horned Ones are getting bogged down a little. We did use our net to tie them down. And the Silver Bullet's now pivoting around to direct some fire into the Horned Ones. But nonetheless, my opponent doing a very good job shutting things down. We're going to push the greatswords in there. And now we're going to pop some debuffs. The Horned Ones, of course, do rampage. So once they lose, once they start taking too much damage, they're going to start rampaging. They're going to be stuck in there, and we'll be able to do some brutal damage. And the Transmutation of Lead does go down, making sure that these guys can't do too much. They don't have any passives, say buffs to their melee attack or anything like that, so we're able to damage them quite a bit here. And you can see the Reiksguard, honestly, while not being ideal in this situation, are still doing some work and helping buy time for the Luminark, for the Hammer of Witches to actually fight its way clear and set up in a new position, and for the Luminark to just do some burning damage here on the Horned Ones, just really beating them up. Here in the pits, in the meantime, the greatsword's still slaying out with the skinks, and you can see there actually the bombardment coming down right as Wiston's Wild Form hits them, trying to keep them protected. But the greatswords, they're still fighting. They're still doing a good job. The skinks up to like 5 kills, 2 kills. The skinks are doing something, surprisingly. But really not great for them. Unfortunately, the Skink Priest has come back, which is a little annoying. We haven't been able to shut him down for good. But, we're forcing off the Horned Ones. We're doing quite a bit of damage there. My opponent here uses the Curse of Honor to try to defend his troops, but we do clip the Porous King Priest here with the with the luminark, and then hit it with the Hammer of Witches, and you can see it's the Ancient Stegodon there. He's done. He's over. He's fallen over, and you can see all those poor skinks just spilling from its back onto the ground. Here in the pits, in the meantime, the Temple Guard pushing in, trying to help, but they're going to get bogged down on these Greatswords. And like I said before, Greatswords trade really well with these guys, especially for the cost, and especially with the Temple Guard not getting a full charge on these guys. The Greatswords are definitely going to come out on top in the long run. In the meantime, Barfazar Gelt running away, trying to save the Luminark here, which is being pressured very heavily. Big misplay on my part here. I should have pulled these guys in to protect the Luminark. Gotten the Reichsguard in there, all that sort of stuff, but I did not. We do get a nice little net here on the Horned Ones, which is going to allow these Silver Bullets to pivot and start raining death and destruction on the Horned Ones. So good sort of stuff there. Not for the Blizzardmen, of course. In the meantime, the Greatswords here, who have been hit by some spells, who have been taking some damage, you know, they're holding on. They'll keep holding on against the Skinkor. Really a bit of a misplay on my part. I should just try to bog these guys all down on, say, one unit of Greatswords, but you know, it is what it is. In the meantime, here in the pits, once again, another transmutation of lead, debuffing all of these guys, making them a lot weaker, meaning that the Greatswords can trade much more efficiently and really beat them down. The cannon crew getting taken offline by the Horned Ones, who have newly been freed from the net. But unfortunately, my opponent is not on top of chasing off the Luminark, which is sort of limping away out of range, where it will then be able to reposition and start firing once more. My opponent is trying to shut down my backline here, diving in on the Silver Bullets, but unfortunately, the Horned Ones are goners. They've been routed. These skinks are falling apart, and now it's simply Krokgar against the world. The poor Pterodon Riders here are trying their best, but really they can't do too much, and at this point my opponent simply decides to GG out. So fun little matchup, once again getting to try out the Luminark. It's a ridiculous unit. I just love it so much. It's a really enjoyable unit in some ways. It's a little gimmicky, a lot, but it can be good fun. Definitely in retrospect, I didn't need this many Greatswords. Probably I could have cut one of these Greatswords and made room for more units of Spears to provide a broader zoning tool, or cut a Greatsword and get an extra unit of Spears and an extra unit of handguns. That would have probably been a better idea. But you know, hindsight's 2020. That is what it is. The Greatswords performed admirably. They did pretty well against the Skinks, despite the fact that my opponent was hitting them repeatedly with Flocks of Doom, with debuffs, with buffing his Skinks all the time, the whole time. Despite that, the Greatswords performed pretty well. The Reichsguard did surprisingly well against the Horned Ones, which I didn't really anticipate. And you know, the Silver Bullets, the Luminark, the Artillery Battery did good. For my opponent's build, I'm not a big fan of Pterodons. I think they're trash, and I'm never going to think they're good, probably. I don't know. I think they need a buff. They need some seriously working. Cool use of the Horned Ones for my opponent, so definitely some fun stuff. Definitely a cool strategy, but I just don't think the Pterodons are worth it. Regardless, though, good again to my opponent, Woodward Andrew. Good again to all the others in the game here. So this is the end of our 300th cast. 3 games for 300. So I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you found it entertaining and fun. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe below if you've not already. If you have any comments, any criticism, anything like that, the usual, be sure to post them down and I'll respond as soon as I'm able. I thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.